glad to have received the overwhelming response for the webinar today, which will talk about the learnings from China, especially at times like these during the lockdown over there, and the resurgence which China has seen, more importantly, from the Chinese ecosystem perspective. And today we have a very eminent set of speakers who are industry thought leaders and leading experts, along with some very prominent investors, to give insights on what are the cues which we can take from China with this regard. So I'm Natasha. I am the co-founder of Venture Gurukool and the managing partner at Venture Gurukool Capability Fund, which is a Cat1 AIF investing in early stage ventures, transforming the everyday economy. And our innate focus is to build capabilities and startups very early on. First and foremost, I would like to thank Yourstory, which is hosting this webinar today. Alongside this, I would like to thank HSA Advocates as well as AWS for being part of this webinar. Moving on, I would now like to introduce the panelists and speakers who will be part of the discussion today. First speaker is Dr. Edward Say, who is a leading global business strategist in China with more than 30 years of experience in strategy and management consulting. He was a managing partner China at Boston Consulting Group and thereafter served as a managing partner at Booz & Company. He's very famous for his award-winning books, The China Strategy and China's Disruptor. Second speaker is Leon Zhang, partner, CDH Emerging Market Fund. Leon is in charge of CDH Emerging Market Fund, which is invested in 7 portfolios in India, including Zomato, Expressbee, and many more. CDH is one of the leading funds in China with 20 billion assets under management. Third speaker is David Lee, co-founder, chairman, and CEO, Wrong360, listed in NYSE. David is an entrepreneur and investor with 25 years of experience in internet and financial technology in the United States, China, India, and Southeast Asia. Wrong360 is a leading independent open platform for discovery and recommendations of financial products in China and Southeast Asia. Fourth speaker is Pei Fu, who is the co-founder and CEO of Carbon, a corporate credit card company targeting Indian startups. Prior to Carbon, Pei Fu has spent 10 years in VC at KPCB and 01 VC. And he's also founded 3 Rocket Internet Ventures. Fifth panelist is Deepti Swain, partner HSA Advocates. Deepti leads the firm's China desk. He's a specialist in investment, structuring, FDI startups, and corporate law. He's led numerous transactions helping entrepreneurs from various genres. This panel discussion will be led by Mr. Mahendra Swarup, who is the founder and managing partner at Venture Gurukool Capability Fund. And now I request Mr. Swarup to lead on with the panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Swarup.
Thank you, Natasha. I can welcome all the participants and also the panelists, and a special thank you to all our panelists from China who had found the time to be part of this panel discussion, which we thought is very appropriate and very timely, having heard the good news that China is bouncing back after succeeding over the COVID-19 crisis. And we in India have always been wondering, does the recovery has an L-shaped kind of a curve or has a V-shaped kind of a curve? But I think if we look at China's story today, I think it's more likely to be a V curve. And we only hope and pray that India also follows that V curve and we have a quick recovery. So this is the most appropriate time to actually learn from our Chinese friends that what is that we need to learn from them, what we need to be caring for now, and what are the key issues which need to address while we are all sitting at home and we are struggling to get our cash in place and see how we are able to survive. So I'm now going to request Dr. Edward Z, who Natasha has very kindly introduced as one of the key figures in China, who follows China and also knows India pretty well. We have known him for a while, and his insights are really, very fruitful. So over to you, Dr. Z.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. Mahendra, can you respond to me if you can hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm very honored to be on the panel this afternoon, and I'm very happy to have a chance to share with you the learnings that we're learning from our fight against the pandemic here in China. This is, of course, a very unfortunate crisis that very little people, if any, actually had anticipated before its outbreak. But when it came very fast, and China had to fight for it almost by itself for several months. And then, unfortunately, the virus also, spread over to other parts of the world, and now I understand also to India, but also to many other countries. So the experience that China have gone through in fighting this virus in the last couple of months is really worth many people to really examine and to really see, what's good and what's not so good. And in particular, from a standpoint of, leading companies, perhaps in the startup stage, and also being venture capital investors into startups, what can we learn from what China have gone through, and in particular for India, what are the experiences that we can pick up, and perhaps there are ways that we don't need to repeat some of the mistakes that China have gone through, but also perhaps in some cases where China have done well, we can learn from it. So when Mahendra asked me to give a sort of a opening sort of presentation, I put together a few slides. It's only 5 slides, so I hope to take you through very quickly. But I want to deliver a couple of messages. One is, China have done a pretty efficient job to arrest the virus, and it's still not entirely over, but the job has been pretty effective. But it requires a lot of resources and deployment in many parts of the society in China. Secondly, is that in fact, while of course the economy has been hit pretty hard due to the crisis, there are also some silver linings. There are sectors where we're seeing a very accelerated growth during this period, and I want to share with you our observations on the ground. But of course, the other panelists will also share their hands-on experience as well. So just bear with me a little bit. I will take you through these slides in about 10 minutes or so. Next slide. So essentially, China had intensively fought the pandemic over the last several months, really since January, and now we're into April. So about 2 to 3 months period. And I think all of you know that China has installed a very stringent lockdown policies across many cities in China, but in particular in the epicenter of the outbreak in Wuhan, which started on the 23rd of January, and it was just released a couple of days ago. It's pretty tough actually, because the whole city was locked down. People were not allowed to go in and out and so on. But in general, from what we know, actually, the Wuhan people were really, fighting against this in a very cohesive manner, albeit in a very difficult time. But the lockdown policy was the driver for arresting the pandemic in a fast manner. The lockdown is not only at the city level, but the enforcement of the checking happens in local levels, in local communities. In Chinese we call it 小区, right? The districts or the housing estates or the little compound that people live in, and all the controls are happening at the borders of.
阿莫格里斯学生， 我飛回來了，我100美金嘅學生嘛，100年100美金嘅學生，我飛55美金嘛，你覺得吧？
And from very early on, the Chinese government required or encouraged people to wear the face mask, and that has become somewhat of a culture in China now. So everybody sort of still wears the face mask. Currently, China still have a very strict policy against the border control. Foreigners, except if they have sort of diplomatic visas and other very specialized visas, otherwise the control is very stringent even now. And early on, when the outbreak just started, it was quite chaotic actually in Wuhan and also in the Hebei province in general. And pretty quickly, the leading government officials, the party secretary of the province as well as the party secretary of the city, were both removed and replaced by other people, and so on. So it's a tough battle, and you could see, it was a very top-down method from the government, both the central government as well as the local governments, and it mobilized all the resources and very strict and stringent controls. But largely speaking, the measure has been very effective in controlling the pandemic. And right now, if you look at Wuhan, it has been reopened. And from what we know, there's already a lot of traffic in and out of the city. If we look at sort of the data, right, and by now, at least in the English-speaking world, people tend to talk about flatten the curve, right? Flatten the curve as quickly as you could. And we heard a lot that in the West, in America, in Europe, people are saying, we need to flatten the curve like China. And this is really how it happened, or how the data showed. China, of course, had the outbreak first, and there was an upsurge around middle of April, but then the curve came down pretty quickly. And so that's the China story. But if you look at the other curves, in particular America, unfortunately, even though America have from the mid-February to mid-March, sort of in a way to prepare for the pandemic, the preparation wasn't really done that well, and you can see how the curve is still accelerating. And as with quite a number of European countries as well, but it looks like, fortunately, some of the curves have been slowing down as well in Europe, but not in America yet. And when we were talking about this a couple of days ago with Mahendra has reminded us that the audience today, in other words, yourself, are largely from the startups. Therefore, most of you will be SMEs, venture capital investors, of course, who are behind these enterprises. So one of the questions that was raised during our discussion a couple of days ago was, what has been the Chinese government doing in terms of supporting the SMEs, the smaller companies? And so I thought about this and put it together this slide. Essentially, of course, at two levels. Right? One level is the local governments, and on the left-hand side, focus on the second point and the third point. Quite a number of local governments has been providing tax reliefs for SMEs as a way to relieve the short-term financial pain. And the third point is also quite a number of cities have issued what's called consumption vouchers or consumption coupons for consumers. So in addition to other mechanisms as well. So the local government are already doing quite a number of measures in order to help to alleviate some of the financial pains of the SMEs. At the central government level, as always, at times of difficulties like this, central government is pretty quick actually in also starting or initializing policies in order to prop up the economy, mostly in the form of fiscal stimulus, in the form of industrial policies, like the third point at the bottom, which is related to new energy vehicles, There's also another policy that came out on the connected and smart cars. And also, very importantly, the Chinese government is committing a lot of money onto investment. Second point, the form and shape of investment perhaps will evolve quite a bit. Whereas in the past, a lot of investments will go into the traditional fixed infrastructure, like bridges, tunnels, high-speed rail, and so on. It looks like this time, given the prevalence of technology and how technology has helped to fight against the pandemic, looks like much of the money will be going into what is now called new infrastructure. And what is new infrastructure is really digital and smart infrastructure, leveraging technology such as 5G, AI, and so on. So the central government will be, and is actually spending a lot of money in trying to prop up the economy, but mostly through these various dimensions. So as I mentioned, you know, the pandemic really was disastrous for many people, and many businesses has been hit very hard, including many of the SMEs in China. But there are also a number of areas that we've seen incredible surges in demand during this period, and I think you all know that. But you know, what I've decided to do, I've asked my team to put together some data so you can get a sense of the dimensions of the growth or the surges that we saw during this period. This is not the most updated data. I think it's until around the mid or late March. But nonetheless, you can see from the upper left-hand corner, you know, how distributed working methods, all the apps that's related to distributed working methods like TikTok, and all the applications like what we're now using, like Zoom, has really have seen an incredible increase on the demand side. And then moving on to the right, of course, still a remote education, remote learning. Students could not go to schools, so you know, students have to rely on remote applications such as TikTok to learn. It's quite incredible. But students, as I understand, they don't quite like TikTok because they still have to learn. But nonetheless, you know, it's somewhat required for them now. The other areas that, you know, we're seeing a major surge in the demand is actually on, in Chinese we call this big health, you know, sort of the general health services area, but leveraging on technology through remote diagnostics and so on. Some of the apps like Ping On Good Doctor have also seen an incredible increase in the adoption of the subscribers. On lower left-hand corner, you know, Tencent, even though they're a very huge company, they also benefited quite a bit because when people stay at home, a lot of people would tend to spend their time on mobile games, when playing the mobile game. So Tencent also benefited quite a bit. In the middle, lower row and middle, increasingly, you know, there's a lot, you know, because people couldn't get out much or couldn't get out at all, so they tend to order things online. So online delivery of food and fresh produce become very popular. And finally, and not least, is that of course the online entertainment became very popular. So, you know, all the apps that provide some online entertainment, like iQIYI, have also enjoyed incredible growth during this period. So this is not exhaustive, but here are some examples of how some of these sectors actually have, in a way, leveraged this opportunity to grow in a very rapid manner. And this is my final page, and I'll finish here. Is that you know, we leveraging on what we just presented you in the last page, you know, we would anticipate post the pandemic in China, at least we see that some of the sector will probably continue to see quite a bit of growth, and these are areas that we call big health, logistics, automation, distributed working, entertainment, retail, education, and social media. And just for example, you know, at least I would anticipate the Chinese government would spend incredible amount of money to build the next generation of smart cities in China. China has been investing a lot of money in building smart cities across many cities in China, but the smart cities so far has been quite functional in nature. Functional meaning it was meant for things such as traffic management, facial recognition, motion recognition, and that kind of stuff. This time, you know, when the virus came, actually, it turns out that all this intelligence that was invested into the smart cities before wasn't able to really fully track where people went. For example, right before the lockdown of Wuhan, apparently, according to the mayor of Wuhan at that time, he said something like 5 million people fled Wuhan and went somewhere else. The Chinese government had no way to track where these people went. If you think about this from a public health standpoint, if there's a way that actually these 5 million people were able to be tracked through whatever mechanisms, then you actually would be able to isolate the carriers of the virus much earlier, much easier. Of course, it wasn't done. The capabilities was not available, even though an incredible amount of money has been put in the smart cities. But of course, you know, everybody, including the Chinese government, recognized the need to improve on the public health agenda. So no longer this is only a narrow definition of a few set of functional agenda. This is a much broader set of agenda that's related to the public management of cities, provinces, and for the matter, the entire country. So, you know, at least I would expect incredible amount of money to upgrade the smart cities and intelligence and create much better interconnectivity across different cities, so that in the future the public health agenda would be much better managed. And then the box right below, I mentioned about big health or healthcare. The focus is going to be leveraging technology to develop more early prevention, early detection, more capable treatment remedies, and so on. So again, you know, there will be quite a bit of investment and money we expect to go into this sector. I already talked about quite a bit of business models gone from offline to online, and I would expect increasing prevalence of what we call OMO model, online merchant with offline model, to create an integrated business model in the areas of retail, education, and remote working, and so on. Big data, of course, will become the backbone to support all this. Without saying, China already have the world's largest big data for right or for wrong, and going forward, I would expect the big data will become even bigger. And also, because of the pandemic, people would try to prevent from having the sort of intimate human-to-human interactions. And there's much more preference for now human-to-machine interactions, or even machine-to-machine interactions. So we expect automation and robotics will take up quite a bit, in particular in logistics, last mile delivery, and also in smart manufacturing. And lastly, I just want to mention that, at least based on my observations, is that while a lot of people, in particular people from the West, has always criticized China as being an authoritarian state, there's little accountability of the government and so on. But in reality, the world is changing very rapidly. The prevalence of social media has been affecting the world, and China is included. And I see that in this time during the pandemic, actually, the social media also play a major role in being a source of reflection of people's opinions and feedback to the governments, both at the central government and the local government. While not everything was perfect, but we do see the feedback from the government pretty quickly in responding to some of the quote-unquote more reasonable feedback from the people through the social media. So I would also expect the role of the social media would evolve after the pandemic is over. So far, it's very much sort of B2C to even increasingly to B. But I believe that in the future, the government potentially also play a much bigger role. So I would expect some G2B, G2C and C2G kind of model coming out in the social media. So that's a very quick summary, Mahendra, of the learnings from China so far. And I will stop here. I want to leave enough time for the other panelists to offer their valuable opinion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Z, for your insights and a very good presentation overall, which could set the pace for this discussions. My questions are to actually, I'm going to address it to Leon. Leon, you're there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Dr. Z, just in his, one of his slides, he said that there was a surge in all the sectors like entertainment, gaming, and education, grocery delivery. You coming from a kind of investor perspective, do you see these surges after the lockdown? Because they seem to be particularly, the surge happens because there's very stringent lockdowns which were imposed in China. So similar lockdowns we are facing increasingly in India now. So do you think that these surges which we see during the period of the lockdown are sustainable and there's a long-term shift in the consumer's mind?
Yeah, I think that the peak will not sustain for such a long time, but I think it will definitely maintain the behavior from the customer, from the consumer, like what it does for SARS in 2003, right? For the online e-commerce, right? So currently, because as you know that, for example, for the online education, a lot of students, they are staying at home and there's no timeline for them to open school. So many of the classes are conducted online. And I think that is the boost to all of this kind of education behaviors, either from school, also from the perception from the parents of the students. I think that kind of behavior shift, I think will be some fundamental change to impact such kind of sectors. Yeah, so I think that in future the peak will not sustain, but I think it will enter into another stage, a new stage for those sectors who have a positive impact for the coronavirus, like online education, like online grocery delivery, and also as well as what they are using the online news. I think that is my views on those kind of sectors.
And the other thing which I need to ask you is that we see in India that some of the investors are getting very excited about online gaming and education, and they're rushing into making investments. So do you think that it's a good time to look at these opportunities which we believe are currently showing very high growth aspects, but subsequently when things settle down, things become normal, everyone is going to go back to the usual offline mode of education, and gaming will not have that kind of an excitement as it is because everyone is indoors. So do you think it's a wise thing for some of the investors who are rushing into making these kind of investments? Are you also looking at these investments, or you are going to sitting back and?
Yeah, understood. Yeah, so from my point of view, I think that because for VC and PE investments is actually a long-term investment instead of to buy or sell in the secondary market, right? So I think it will to take into consideration of many factors. I think first, as you mentioned, that the current world situation will have some positive impact on those sectors, but also you need to take a consideration about the sustainability of the specific business model, the target they are currently looking at. And also, I think the most important factor currently facing India is actually for all of these startups. So, do you have enough cash to will help you go through the tough time, right? I think you need to have at least more than 6 months cash to burn in the next 6 months, because I think it's not still clear about what's going to happen in India as compared to China. I think currently we can have some kind of conclusion for China that everything will get back to normal in quite near future. But in India, I think we still need 1 or 2 months to see what is the real bottom and when it will bounce back. So I think for most of the VC and private equity firm I'm both talking with, I think they are more I think more conservative to make investment currently. I think they are more willing to wait and to really let the company to test their business model to have enough cash to go through the tough time, and then they will pull the trigger when all of the things get clear.
One point which you raised, that you believe that all the startups and early stage ventures which have got funded should have cash reserves or a runway for another about 6 months.
Yeah.
In your portfolio, if you believe that some of these companies will not have enough cash to last out for that period, so would you be supporting them in terms of more bridging kind of investments or some kind of a debt instrument or any other mode of helping them out through this crisis?
Yeah, I think that is a very good question. I think the first thing we told our portfolio companies that they need to really consider to spend their cash, right? How they will cut down their payrolls to conservatively to spend, and I think that is the first leverage they can do internally, and also I think that is the most rational way for them to go through the tough time. I think purely depending on the backup of the shareholders, I think that is not the most efficient way to do that. But for those companies, we have a very confident business model, and we think that they have the ability to go through this tough time. But for some very critical reason that there's some shortage of cash, we will back them, but we don't promise on that, and we also don't want to give them those kind of I think the back road to conduct their business. I think it is the time to test their own abilities to get through those tough times.
I fully appreciate that it's tough times for the startups, but at the same time, it's a tough decision on the part of venture capital funds like yours to be able to make up your minds that which one to support, which one not to support.
Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, if you want to answer that question, please answer that. If you wish not to answer, my question is that as a percentage of your portfolio, how many of your investments you feel will not survive this crisis?
We will not survive. I think, hopefully, I think zero.
Zero.
I think 100% of them will survive.
Investors, right? Hopefully that everyone will be able to glide through this and swim through the tough times. But
yeah, we also have a very detailed discussion with each of our portfolio companies, and what is good is that many of them have I think have a sufficient fund to help them to go through the tough time. Yeah, so I think that the situation you have mentioned, the opportunity for us to back for our portfolio portfolio will be limited, and we are happy about that.
I'll go to David now. David, you have been a very successful entrepreneur. You employ more than 800 odd people in your thing. You have listed your company in the New York Stock Exchange, right?
Yeah.
You are a large company today, so you definitely don't have the same issues as an early stage startup founder would have. So what would be your advice to the founders at this point of time? As Leon has said, they need to have a 6 months runway and they should conserve their cash. So what is the advice you want to give to the young founders in India? That how do you think is a couple of cues you can give them that how can they ride this crisis?
Yeah, I think the quick answer is to manage their cost. I think that is the key to help them to go through the tough time. Yes.
Yeah.
As long as you can maintain your business, I think you can take everything to cut your cost to help you to survive for those situations. Yeah.
David, do you have any views on this? Can you hear me?
Sure. So yes, we have we are so around 360. We are a platform. We're connecting 150 million registered users with about 2,000 financial institutions. We have close to 1,000 employees, right? So really, the pandemic is really reshaping the way how we live and work. I mean, really, in short term for us, the most important thing really is the safety and the health of our employee, of our customers, of our partners, right? And really, the survival of any institution really is the only agenda for us in the first 3 months. So we can just share with you guys what we have done in the last almost 2.5 to 3 months and now. So we learned the pandemic or the virus end of January. That was right before the big Chinese New Year holidays. So a couple of things we did even before the holidays. We started the so we have a leadership team. We put together a team from different part of organization. Basically, we figure out what are the plans in terms of how to set up a remote working environment, how to keep the business continuity, how to communicate with our customers, with our financial partners, with our employees. So right before the holiday, we actually started to reconfigure our OA systems, our office, our CIM, our internal CIM system, the OA system, so we can help our employee to work remotely. So we send, for example, laptops directly to their home. We set up our system so they can clock where they are and what's the daily temperature. We started sourcing some basic PPEs, those masks and personal protection equipments. We also work with local authorities, our office space landlord, in terms of how we're able to resume the business. So that's that's January 25th. So we had about 2 weeks lockdown. So on February 3rd, that's the day the whole most of the country started telecommuting, so working from home. So we had a hard time back in February. So, but we did see our business grow, try to recover. It's maybe 10, maybe 20% week over week, but not until around March 16th. That's around 7 weeks after the initial lockdown of the whole country. That's March 16th. Our headquarters in Beijing are allowed to go back to work partially. So we have, even as of today, we have around 35% of our people can go on site and start working. But however, we have about 60, maybe 70% of our businesses have resumed. So we did a couple of things. I mean, And the first thing, actually very important, especially for startup companies, is really the cash flow management, and how to cut your cost rigorously. And sometimes you need to do that very aggressively. So we did a couple of things. Like the first one we did back in January, February, and early March. We actually closed. We actually basically swapped our high cost office space. We found like office space nearby. It's about half of the cost. So we closed down 2 floors, basically about around 4,000 square meters. We moved folks to the less fancy but convenient office space. So overall, we reduced our rent around 30% of the whole company. And also, another part of our cost is some of the capacity. We do expect some of our capacity, for example, even our servers, our database or servers, the capacity will be less utilized, right? We need less hardware. We are shifting from offline to online. We need more capacity from the cloud. So we basically shut down and also sold some of the redundant hardware capacity and moved to online, the cloud space. So in terms of the optimization of the workforce, those are very hard decisions, very, very hard. We actually did some optimization. We actually figured we'd rather be more aggressive, cutting the office space. As we found out, we are thinking even right now we have half of the floor. If we reduce that or shift to lower cost, we would be able to save another 15, maybe 20 engineers. So that are the cash flow things we have managed. And also the second thing is communications. Keep in mind in Beijing, we still have a 14-day quarantine. Basically, people return to Beijing from a business trip to Shanghai need to be quarantined for 14 days. So we had to make some arrangement, basically send some of our folks to our client side in Jiangsu province in southern China. So they go to remote or like satellite locations and spend 2 weeks there and start serving our customers. So that was the arrangements we have done for that part. So I guess a lot of things, diverse is in the detail because we are fighting against the coronavirus. It's invisible, right? And it's a lot of people are scared. So we do need to proactively prepare for that. Even some of the how to quarantine your office, how to clean your office. So do prepare to acquire masks or PPEs for your office space if you are ready to open your office in a few weeks down the road. But my advice for you guys is prepare for a long fight. The coronavirus is not going to disappear in a couple of months. Even China, in some part of the country, we are worried about the second wave will come back. So I would say it's definitely not going to be a V shape. It's hopefully not a W shape, right? In some area, hopefully will not come back. Even like Hong Kong, we know Hong Kong managed the situation reasonably well, but there was a small second wave come back 2 weeks ago. The government has managed to flatten the curve or lower the number in the last 2 weeks. So for entrepreneurs, for startup companies, so my advice is definitely prepare for long-term fight. So you need prepare for the worst. Even some of the worst situation you haven't seen in India or we haven't seen in China. I guess risks are really the things you're not aware, you're not prepared. And even here in China, in China or even in Hong Kong or in Singapore, we have seen in the battle, we have won some of the battle, but it's going to be tough down the road. So I guess India, I hope you guys will open it up in a few weeks down the road. But I would definitely think the open up will be will be more a staggered approach or phased-in approach. Maybe we are facing in some geographic or in some sector or in some part of the businesses. So like what we have found out in China for startup companies, for peers, we have even for our partners. Keep in mind, we are working with 2,000 financial institutions in China. So those institutions, those regions, if they are more digitally savvy or they're more digitally capable, they can weather the storm much better. So I can share with you some of the data. Even among in China, we have 33 provinces or regions. One of the province is the Hubei province. The hit hard, right? The province for Q1, the GDP is the whole economy dropped around 98%. But we have another province, which is the Zhejiang province in the eastern China. It's the digital economy is thriving. The percentage is very, very high. The overall Zhejiang's GDP only got hit by 2%. The average for the whole country is around 20%. So keep in mind in China, for example, fintech, like payments, for example, I haven't used renminbi or the cash for a couple of months. People are scared of using cash because, even the paper currency may carry the coronavirus. So that's why we see more regions will transfer to a more digital-driven economy, right? And more sectors, healthcare, like fresh food delivery, education, even fintech, payments, digital, like online lending, for example. We see more and more banks are pushing for digital, like online decisioning, real-time decisions, no face-to-face, no face-to-face approval, right? They're pushing for, we call no-touch finance. I guess those are the trends. We'll definitely see that in India, in the rest of the world. So I want to just close my part. There was a joke. Who would be the driver of digital transformation? That be the entrepreneurs or the investors or the CEOs or CFOs or the coronavirus? Of course, the answer will be coronavirus probably will be the most drivers pushing for digital transformation. We'll do a better job than the investors and your CFO, CEOs.
All right. I think any adverse circumstances actually do create opportunities. So I think very good advice to the founders. I think going to Peifu, David ended his thing that there will be an opportunity in digital payments and fintech. You have a startup, Carbon, which actually is giving credit cards to startups. You have access to data, right? I'm not going to ask you questions on your data, but just for the sake of the participants, you have access on the cash situation of many of the startups in India. So do you think that, as Leon said, as David said, do you think that the startup ecosystem in India has enough cash to be able to sustain itself for the next 3 to 6 months?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mahendra, for the question. I'll first do a small introduction of what we do first, and then I think that will give people the better context of where we're coming from.
Yes.
So basically, Carbon Card is a fintech that issues corporate credit cards to startups. As you understand, in India and actually anywhere in the world, companies, especially startups, need these cards to pay for expenses like AWS, like Google, like Zoom, like right now, or Zendesk, various expenses, right? So they need these corporate credit cards. But it's actually very, very difficult to apply for corporate credit cards from banks because they ask for personal guarantees, they ask for fixed deposits, they ask for board resolutions, shareholders lists, and a whole bunch of documents. So it's actually quite difficult for startups to have corporate credit cards. So what do? They actually use their personal credit cards to pay for the expenses first, and then later at the end of the month, reimbursed from the company. And that is something that we don't think makes sense because it is a corporate expense. Therefore, there should be a corporate card to pay for it. So basically, Carbon issues corporate credit cards without a need of personal guarantee, without a need of fixed deposits, and it can be applied in 10 minutes. We issue you a card in 24 hours. Plus, it's all entirely free because there's no interest fee, there's no processing fees, because we make money from the interchange, meaning from the merchants. And just to give you more context, we now serve more than 300 startups in India, in both B2C, in B2B, early stage ones and late stage ones. So yes, we do see what's happened with their spending. And I think just to trace back a little bit about what happened with the spending patterns of our customers since COVID. Let's say by the beginning of March, people were starting to work from home. So the first half of March, travel was cut entirely. It used to be about 40% almost, say back in January and in December, 40% of a company's expenses were in travel. But by early March, all companies pretty cut that down for travel. The second half of March, people actually stopped spending, because when the news of the 21-day lockdown arrived, companies were scrambling to prepare for business continuity. And so they were too busy thinking about spending. They're busy, say, optimizing, laying people off, et cetera, right? So after about 2 weeks of optimization, since the beginning of April, these companies are starting to spend. And the ones that they spend on are mostly for these collaboration tools like Zoom, like Slack, like Zendesk, like Freshworks, etc. Right? That's one type of spend that they've been spending on. The other type of spend is actually marketing. So on Facebook, on Google, on LinkedIn. And the ones that are still spending on marketing are the ones that Dr. Edward mentioned earlier. The ones, say, doing gaming, the companies in online education, in entertainment. And I think one interesting insight here is that the gaming companies are actually taking this as an opportunity to grow 10 times, because they realize that the CAC, the cost of acquisition, has actually declined significantly. Because prior to the COVID, the big spenders for advertising were e-commerce, fintech, especially lending, and gaming. Basically, I would say these are the three giants of paying for advertisements. But because of COVID, e-commerce has stopped spending on advertising. So has the fintech companies. Therefore, it is really just a gaming and some online education companies that are paying for Google, paying to Facebook. And so the CAC declines significantly. And at the same time, the value they're able to generate from the customers has increased, because people are spending time at home, and therefore they have more time to play games, to do remote learning, etc. Right? So for these industries, they've actually increased spending because it is time for them to grow. Now, I think, but back to your question, whereas do I see whether there's enough cash for companies to last, say, 3 to 6 months in India? And I would say, honestly, it is not from our current visibility of what our startups are spending money on and not spending money on, but it's more from my, say, previous years as a venture capitalist from China investing in India. And one major difference between the Chinese startups and the Indian startups is that I think Indian startups are much more resilient in terms of runway, because they realize that there are not as many VCs in the market to back them up. And so since day one, many Indian startups that I know are extremely cautious in terms of spending, scaling, and burning cash. So compared to the Chinese counterparts, whom have access to a larger pool of capital, of VCs or investors, I would say overall, the Indian startups DNA has been relatively conservative compared to Chinese startups. And so I think for sure these Indian startups have enough cash to last more than 6 months. That is not something that I think is the issue. And people have always said that in India, if you don't have runway of 10 months, because sometimes it takes like as long as 4 to 6 months to fundraise and get around in, you will be in trouble. And so I think that that I would say environment that the Indian startups have been operating under, which is for lack of a better word, a shallower capital pool, has actually built in that resilient DNA in the entrepreneurs and founders to ensure that they do have a long runway and to ensure that they do operate in an optimized manner. So back again to your question, I think definitely, I think the Indian startups are very resilient, and I'm certain that they will be able to last far longer than 6 months. Thanks, Pefu. I think what I see from you is you rightly said that the domestic venture capital pool is very shallow and the access to capital is limited as compared to China. So Leon, both Leon and you with your previous venture capital experience, would the Chinese VC funds who were looking to come to India, and some of you like Leon who have been active in India, do you see this as an opportunity to start investing and bringing large pools of capital from China into investing in early stage ventures in India?
Yeah, sure. Of course, we think that it's going to be a very good opportunity for us to reevaluate those target companies. But I think the obstacle is that we cannot travel to India, right? We cannot do the due diligence as long as all of this lockdown passed away. Yeah.
So I think,
definitely, I think it's going to be good opportunities for all of this. Not only the investor from China, I think globally to reevaluate some very good target in India. Yeah.
So do you think it's a good opportunity for domestic or Indian venture capital funds to be able to raise money?
Actually, I'm not quite sure, because I think that the risk appetite of all of this fund, I think they are more conservatives given the uncertainty about the global situation caused by the virus, and I think they are more willing to invest in some kind of fixed income asset instead of equity. Yeah. I think that as long as, at least for this year, I think it will be a little bit hard.
How are your limited partners or your own investors reacting to this situation? Are they going to be honoring the commitments made to you, or have you heard from your LPs that they want you to?
Yeah. Okay. So because most of our limited partners coming from China, so I think the situation is not quite the same for those VC fund, the local VC fund in India. Yeah. So for our local LPs, I think because the situation is getting back in China, I think they are more confident to conduct their equity investment. But for the other global investors, I'm not quite sure about when will their confidence getting back.
You mentioned, I think some of the venture capital from China mentioned to me earlier, and you also now say the same thing, that one of the things which is a big drawback is that since the travel is restricted, so how do you do due diligence? So we have Deepthi here from HSA. The question goes to him. Is there any way that you can create virtual data rooms and do virtual due diligence so that these travel restrictions don't come in the way of investment opportunities for foreign investors, and also to receive this money which is so badly needed by our startup ecosystem? So is there any way that the legal community, the accounting community can get together, right, and come out with some kind of a virtual due diligence process, which a lot of credibility, which gives the confidence of a foreign investor, instead of coming face to face and looking at documents themselves? Because is there any way that you can create a virtual due diligence process?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And about time that I say good evening to all my fellow panelists, and thank you to Venture Gurukool. Mr. Swarup, I think before I answer your question, I'll just give a very quick introduction about HSA Advocates. As many would be aware, we are a full-service law firm, and we, have a large capability to help investors and startups in India to, take care of their business activities, across sectors. And so therefore, I will quickly come to your question, and I can affirm to you that right now more than 70 to 80% of companies in India, be it the large scale companies or mid cap or startups or MSMEs, they have transformed to an online data room system. And in fact, these days, lawyers as well as accounting firms are preferring that because it is saving a lot of time. So I will completely agree that due diligence can face a difficulty, but with use of technology, especially in situations like this where digitization has completely taken over, due diligence and related meetings, etc., are happening online. However, of course, it is understandable that, before pressing the final key, there is generally a round of physical meetings and discussions. And of course, founders, partners, and their advisors also like to visit the facilities of startups, Indian companies, etc. So that is something that will lack. But I think these problems are largely temporary. Until a certain amount of time, this may not happen. However, we are, seeing some kind of activity. In fact, certain startups and other companies in India have actually stepped up and tried to make all their documentation online and are readying themselves, for seeking out investments, preparing information memorandums. So that is one good part. And I would also like to talk about the fact that in these current times, the government of India has also taken a lot of steps to help both investors as well as startups. For example, the Small Industries Development Bank of India has announced a working capital loan of up to 2 crore, which can be returned back in 36 months. That is one thing that is helping a couple of investors gain confidence on these startups that they can survive a little more time period now. India, the government, along with Sequoia Capital and Matrix Partners, have also developed, an action team where they have set up 100 crore worth fund. They have already released, some parts of these grants to about 6 startups. So that is also good news coming in. I would also like to, speak about some of the relaxations in terms of compliances and filings that the Indian government has allowed to startups, which is also another good thing. There are no penalties, no additional fees for delays. And likewise, there are also other initiatives that government of India has taken where government is reaching out to various types of startups. Of course, right now they are largely concentrated into technology, health techs, based startups, science and technology related tech startups. While this is a smaller focus right now, however, there is a lot of movement and traction between government and private setups, where private startups are encouraged to come with innovative business solutions, to handle the current situations. So while yes, there is a problem in hand that we are all facing globally, but I think there is some kind of brighter side. We are also seeing many startups who would otherwise face a lot of difficulty in terms of cash crunches, supply chain issues, also customer retention problems. But we are seeing that all these types of startups are actually thinking innovatively, and they are trying to tie up with fellow startups, and they are already reaching out to us for help, to draft them with partnership documentation or forge new type of joint ventures, where they're trying to take the help of other startups who are using technology or trying to offer different types of solutions, and taking their business to a different level. Of course, while these may sound very lucrative, it is difficult on the ground. However, there is some kind of movement that is happening. In fact, the other day,
I think about startups collaborating with each other, right? That's extremely.
yeah.
And I'll just ask if Deepti, if you don't mind, I go to Dr. Edward Z at this point of time, and see that, as Deepti said, Dr. Z, that the government of India has taken a lot of initiatives, and so also some of the larger venture capital funds have come together and created pools of capital to help some of the startups here in collaborating with the government.
Yeah.
From the China perspective, Dr. Z, do you think that China, having bounced back almost when the crisis is peaking in many other developing economies, that China was used this opportunity to really hunt around for bargain deals around the globe? What do you think? That's a question upper mind in everyone here out in India, especially, that would the Chinese investors, strategic players who have bounced back, have deep pockets, right? If you look at their balance sheets, there's still tons and tons of cash sitting in their balance sheets. Would they use that cash to really hunt around the globe, especially India, and come out looking at bargain deals? Valuations would be moderated, but the nature of valuations is that. So from your perspective, I'm not asking the venture capital, the entrepreneurs, you as an independent consultant and someone who has a lot of experience behind you, do you think that the Chinese would look around and come in hordes to countries like India and say, okay, we'll buy everything off?
Well, thank you for the question. It's actually a very interesting question. First of all, I would separate government behavior and the business behavior. The government actually have been taking, as you know, a rather collaborative and outward-looking behavior. And as soon as the Chinese government have figured that the pandemic within China is under somewhat of control, and many other countries in the world are beginning to run into the pandemic, actually China as a government, from a government behavior standpoint, has been quite proactive in reaching out to help, in particular in supplying medical supplies and sharing the experiences on how to fight the pandemic with the counterparts in quite a number of other countries. But that is, of course, somewhat of a geopolitical move, and that's probably not within the scope of our discussion tonight, right? But from the standpoint of the business, as you mentioned, actually, I see, based on what I do, with my clients, I see both ways happening. One way is, of course, some of the more well-funded Chinese investors are looking out for a potential place outside of China, including India for the matter, but not only India. And obviously, when you're in the bottom of the market, there could be a bargain place. And I say that this applies in particular to well-funded investors, as well as the big corporates, big Chinese corporates who are interested in expanding beyond the China border also are doing that. The other side is actually also happening. Of course, so for many of the foreign companies, what we call normally the multinational companies, who came to China and invest in China, many of them are also encountering short-term difficulties in their operations. However, for the better funded global companies, they also have inquired us to help them to look at potential acquisition opportunities within China, because for a long time, the valuation of the Chinese company has been pretty high, actually, for the foreign company standpoint. But now, at least from what I know, talking to quite a number of the smaller companies, they're also encountering a lot of short-term challenges. So the owners are quite willing to open up discussions with the larger foreign companies in terms of potential percentage deals. So we're seeing both sides happening, Mahendra, and it's quite interesting.
Good. Peifu, I'm going to take this question to Peifu now. We have another 5 minutes to go. In a sense, Peifu, that you are in the middle of a fundraise, as I understand, right? Now, how would you look at in the sense that many of the startups were looking around for a fundraise. So how would you say that? Is this a good time for people to keep pursuing raising funds, or they should pull back and ride through this and then come back when things get normal? Or in the sense, what I'm asking more in the sense of timing, right? Is it a good time to approach? I'm talking with the perspective of approaching Chinese investors. So is it a good time for Indian startups and Indian early stage ventures to approach Chinese investors and say, okay, fine? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, got it. I think I would take a step back, and I think the simple answer to that is really, what is the mental state of these investors? If we put the investors into 3 buckets, the ones from Europe and from US, the ones from India, and the ones from China. Obviously, the mental states of the investors in US and Europe are not quite where they want to invest. They're now preserving their own portfolios and making sure that they can get through this crisis. And so even though they know there will be value to be found elsewhere, I think mentally they're just hijacked, and it is very difficult for them to get beyond that and think, okay, how do I make money now? They're more worried about how do I stay alive, how do I make sure my portfolios don't die, So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is definitely to survive first, right? That may, to some extent, be the case for some Indian investors as well, because after all, the crisis is, I don't, from many people that I've spoken to, it hasn't peaked, and because it hasn't peaked, it naturally stirs up a lot of uncertainty amongst Indian investors. So they themselves are going through that cycle. I would say relatively, the Chinese investors, because they have gone through, say, the first phase of coronavirus. Hopefully it's the last phase, but in any case, it is a first phase. And so mentally, they are a little more relaxed, and they are seeing things go back to normal. So right now, in many cities in China, you can see traffic. People are going to cafes, people are dining out. So that sense of normalcy in front of the investors' eyes gets them to a different state, which is now that things are back to normal, what can we do? Is it a good time to start hunting for opportunities, et cetera, like Dr. Edward rightly said, valuations are indeed down, where the sectors that they want to invest, right? So I do think that the Chinese investors are more open, mainly because of the mental capacity aspects. Now, is it a good question? Now, the timing wise, because your question is for our audience here today is like, is it a good time for the Indian startups to reach out to Chinese investors? I think it really depends on which sector you're in, whether you've had prior interaction with these investors, whether you are in a sector that the Chinese investors are looking at, whether you have strategic value to these Chinese large corporate venture capital arms or large internet companies. I think these are the various aspects you should first consider before even reaching out. Because like Leon rightly said, a lot of investors realize that they cannot do diligence for Indian startups. And so they simply say, let's just hold back for a bit and let's see how things go. That's on most people's mind, right? So I think back to so basic question is like, is it good timing for Indian startups to reach out to Chinese investors? So that really depends on, like I said, all those factors, right? Now, what else can you do though? Let's say that if you are in a situation where you don't think you've been the bucket where a lot of Chinese investors will be interested at this stage, what can you do? I actually think the decisions that you make today and the things that you do today will impact how you will fundraise tomorrow or in the future. Let me be a little more specific there. When a crisis like this hits, a lot of VCs want to see how you react to this crisis. We're able to make the tough decisions. We're able to optimize to a level that you couldn't have before. We're able to change the model so drastically and timely for this crisis that you are now a more profitable or more sustainable startup. If you are able to do that today, whenever the lockdown ends, whether that be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, the investors are going to look at you and say, wow, that's a pretty gutsy move that you did, and it's turned out well. Shows that you're able to make right decisions, et cetera, right? So I think it really depends on how you react to this crisis, and that will be looked upon highly by the Chinese investors. And I think, for ourselves, we are focusing on our operations, making sure that we make making sure we can grow in this period. Because if you can prove that can grow in this period, then that really beats anything else. It shows the investors that, hey, these guys are still growing during COVID. That's definitely different from many other companies, right? So you can prove that by pivoting or by focusing on certain aspects of your business. For instance, we are now reaching out to the gaming companies because we know they are spending money during this time, and we're issuing them credit cards, right? So we know the gaming company, they're growing, so we then reach out to them very proactively because we can extend them a credit card to improve their cash flow and to help them with their advertising, right? So we realize that this is a bucket that's growing, and it makes sense for us to reach out to them now, right? So things like that, we are quite, I would say I'm spending more than 95% of my time growing our numbers and issuing more corporate credit cards at this time than talking to investors. Because ultimately, after you talk to, like, say 10 investors, if the majority of them say that, hey, they're too busy, let's talk later, then I think you should pause and not talk to another 20, because more likely than not, the next 20 will have the same answers as the first 10. So I think it is really up to what you think the priority is. And I think the priority for us is to think about how to turn this crisis into an opportunity, and make all these, like, Sir Winston Churchill made this comments that never let a good crisis go to waste. And I do think that is a very I think that's the right mentality to have here, is to use this opportunity to make all these drastic changes that you wanted to, but you couldn't in the past, and come out stronger from this crisis than before. Now, if you can think in that perspective and move in that direction, then I don't think you have a problem fundraising. So that's kind of my view on this point.
Really good inputs, Peifu, there. I think I'll just go to Leon. Peifu said that most of the VCs will reward what actions during this crisis startups have taken. So what are the couple of things which you would say that as a venture capital fund out of China, you would like the startups to be doing today for you to say that, yes, worth looking at startup and they've done the right things during the crisis. So what are the right things which the startups should do today to be able to make themselves attractive to investments when things become normal?
Yeah, I think that the tough time is actually the exact time to testify the strategic ability of those founders of those startups, how they get their companies, how they make tough decisions like cut costs or lay off people or squeeze their business line. So I think from all of these measures, all of these initiatives, that from our perspective, we can see that what is the real capability of the founders and how long they can go in the future. I think that is very key. So I really agree with people that the current action all of the founders take to go through the tough time will be kind of benefit or pressures for them to not only to raise capital in future, but also to conduct the business in the future. So I think that from the investors' perspective, we really appreciate that all of these founders who can have made the tough decisions, can lead the company to go through the tough time and to come back with a stronger position. I think for all of these startups, those companies, I think we are more interested to look after in the future after after the coronavirus situation pass away. Yeah.
Right. David, I think I'm going to give each one of you another 1 minute each to say something which all startups in India should probably stick to and then do at this point of time to be able to not only conserve their cash or cut their costs and be able to survive, but also do things which they will be ready to actually grab the opportunity as soon as the curve starts moving up. So David, you have, being an entrepreneur, if you are now leading a large company, but if you were a startup, right, what would you have done?
Yeah, we were born 80 years ago. We are still in a startup mode. We have projects. We have new lines of businesses. We are in Southeast Asia, even India. We are still a startup. That's why I always be proud of being an entrepreneur and run a startup company. That's we keep that spirit, especially in the most difficult time in the world, right? And I just want to share with you, in Chinese, crisis has two components of meanings. The first component, of course, is risk or crisis. But the second component of the meaning, which is more important, is opportunity. So that's why in Chinese philosophy, I'm sure in a lot of Asian philosophy in India as well, is crisis comes with opportunities. I just want to share with you a little bit of history, like even e-commerce. E-commerce really started thriving after the SARS crisis. That's around 2003. That was about 17, 18 years ago. That was the beginning of the e-commerce era, right? And about 10 years ago, after the financial crisis started from New York, we have seen a lot of sectors, tech-driven, like online travel, online education. Like we started almost 9 years ago, right? And I guess this time, coronavirus really pushed or forced us to thinking, pushed all the companies, each country, or even each family think about how we're going to live, how we're going to work, how we're going to interact or communicate with our family, with our society, with our with each other, right? I would say this time definitely the service sectors, all the service sectors, the medical service, financial services, or serving your bank or to be, right? And so this is really the time the whole service sector are pushed, are forced to be digital, to be online, to be doing it remotely, right? So that's what I really think. So for the coronavirus, we don't know it's going to last for 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months. I heard some scientists say it may take another year and a half. It's exactly what happened 100 years ago. That's the Spanish flu, right? So guys, you're entrepreneur, investors, or as a citizen of the earth, right? Prepare for the worst. Prepare for next 12 months, maybe 18 months of lockdown or partial lockdown, hopefully, right? Prepare we don't see each other face to face for the next 6 to 9 months. Actually, I was in Mumbai, I was in Bangalore exactly a month ago. It's March 5th. I left India, returned to China like a month ago, right? I mean, really, we do need to figure out how we live and work and innovate and run a business in a touch-free environment. So that's the way we should prepare. And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe, take care of the family. And I think one thing very important, start exercising, do push-up, right? I know one of our colleagues actually ran 10 kilometers in her room. So can you imagine a lady used to run one marathon? She was in a lockdown, she ran 10K in her room. So we do need to exercise to build up the immune system of our body. Also beef up the immune system for your company, for your family, and prepare for this battle. I mean, so that's my advice for you. Just stay healthy, stay safe, and talk to friends and help each other. We are fighting the war against the invisible enemy worldwide.
Thank you, David, for your insights. Edward, I think last word from you in sense that what do you think in of a lot of people are saying that when COVID does get over and we win the war against COVID, there'll be a tectonic shift in terms of consumer behavior, in terms of how we interact with people, how do we work, right? Work from home, and spending on non-essentials will drop dramatically. It'll be a new word in a way, right? What do you think that are these just for the sake of colonists to write, or did you see this in China happening? Do the consumer are behaving differently? People are not going to Luckin Coffee. People are not going to Starbucks. People are not...
Yeah, absolutely. Really, I think I think this will be a new norm, right? The new norm will be people are going to be more comfortable, stay in a digital or touch-free lifestyle, right? I know my family, we used to buy more stuff offline. Now it's shifting 80%, 90%. All the goods, merchandise, or fresh groceries are online, right? So I've been locking down in the last 4 weeks, no travel, right? So I mean, really we get a lot of work done online. It's very efficiently spend more time with family. I think we do miss to see each other, friends, family, like hug each other, handshaking. But definitely, I think the coronavirus is going to change this generation of people, right? This is really for this generation of post generation Y or Z, even post the new millennials. This is the first natural disaster worldwide. Now worldwide, we are talking about 2, 3, maybe 4 billion people are isolated, right? We are going to thrive. We're going to survive. We're going to thrive. We're going to change the way we manage our work, manage our households, and interact. And we definitely find some of the merits of spend more time reading, spend more time with the kids, and actually talk to more friends. Of course, it's virtual, right? Now, I know today we have about 2,000 people, right, virtually online. I mean, without the crisis will never happen. So I guess we do need to maintain perspective in terms of how things is going to develop or go. But the world will be better after this whole thing. Hopefully soon.
The webinar. Thank you very much. Just one last question to Dr. Z. I think David and everyone else are talking about that once we come out of this COVID-19, it'll be all kinds of digital businesses will grow. So what do you think of the offline businesses, the huge big brands, right, which are multi-billion-dollar brands out of the US, Europe, Italy, and else? What happens to them?
I think a lot of the traditional brands will have to find a way to adapt themselves to the online world. In fact, before the epidemic outbreak happened, quite a number of major brands, leading brands, and consumer in particular, has been moving more digital. I think this episode actually will be accelerating their move to become more digital and create a more distinguished brand in the online world. But I think the changes is going to be quite profound. But at the same time, I will also want to caution a little bit that humanity is sometimes a little bit lazy. While there are changes that we can anticipate, humanity can very easily go back to its original inertia. And I think some of these phenomena that we're now seeing during the crisis will probably fade away quite a bit. But some of these will remain, largely on the dimensions that David has mentioned. I agree with that. So, let's see how the world works. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is, how the world is really impacted, or how humanity needs to reflect upon who we are because of the crisis. Because, before the crisis, all the focus, as you know, Mahendra, was very much on the trade talk, the US-China trade talk. It's all about economic development, GDP, and so on. Almost nobody talk about an issue like this. And it's like nobody cared about it. Nobody even was aware of that. And even if there were global issues such as climate change, pollution, AI, ethics, and those kind of stuff, they don't register on the agenda of the major powers, really, not so much, in particular, of course, from the USA standpoint. But this epidemic is now forcing a lot of people, a lot of countries' leaders, hopefully, they need to reflect upon, what are we doing? If the virus doesn't really know where the national border is, and it is just a common enemy to the whole humanity, how do we collaborate? How do we work closely together to try to address this kind of situation, even when it happens again? We know for sure that something like this will happen again. It may not be a virus epidemic, but it could be something else. But we're facing global issues together, and we've got to work together on a much more collaborative basis rather than on a parochial basis.
Thank you very much. I think it's been excellent 1.5 hours. Thank you. There were more than 1,000 participants in this webinar. Thank each one of you participants for being so patient and listening. And hopefully there are learnings here. And each one of you would have become some key learnings and go and implement in your own startups or whatever profession you are in. Thank you very much, Dr. Z, Deepthi, Peifu, Leon, David, and Natasha and Yourstory for hosting us. It's been very engaging 1.5 hours. Thank you once again, and be safe and be secure till we are able to meet physically and able to shake hands once all over again.